She was sitting on the floor of a hospital bathroom at 2 in the morning, pregnant, abandoned, and completely alone. The man she had loved for 2 years had read her message, typed 5 words, and blocked her on everything. No explanation, no goodbye, just gone. She was a Black woman who had spent 4 years holding other people together in the worst moments of their lives. And now, shaking in a supply closet bathroom with a positive test in her hand and nobody left to call, she made one small mistake. She texted the wrong number. And somewhere across the city of Atlanta, in a dark office on the 14th floor, a Korean Mafia boss, a man with a dragon tattooed up his neck and blood on his hands and 3 years of unprocessed grief living in his chest, felt his phone vibrate. He read her message. He knew immediately it wasn't meant for him. He knew exactly what he should have done. He answered anyway. What started as a wrong number became the last thing either of them expected. A connection more honest than anything they had ever known. But the higher they built it, the closer his world crept toward hers. And when danger finally arrived at her hospital, at her door, wearing a stranger's face, what he did next will either break your heart or restore your faith in people entirely. Before we begin the story, comment below where you're watching from and what time it is there. If stories about karma, love, and hidden truths resonate with you, be sure to subscribe to the channel. The night Chelsea Morgan Hayes found out she was pregnant, the rain was hitting the windows of Grady Memorial Hospital like it had something to prove. She had taken the test in the staff bathroom on the 4th floor, the one near the supply closet that nobody used after 10 p.m., because the fluorescent light buzzed like a dying thing and made everyone look a little bit dead. She had bought the test 3 days earlier and carried it in the front pocket of her bag like a grenade she wasn't ready to pull the pin on. 3 days of 12-hour shifts, of listening to monitors and adjusting IV lines and telling families that everything was being done, everything that could be done was being done. And the whole time, that small white box sitting at the bottom of her bag like a secret she already knew the answer to. She did not cry when the second line appeared. That surprised her. She had expected to fall apart immediately, the way she had fallen apart when her mother died 3 years earlier, sitting on the kitchen floor of the apartment in Decatur at 2 in the morning, unable to stand up for what felt like hours. This time, she just sat on the edge of the toilet seat and looked at the test and felt something very cold and very quiet move through her chest, like a door closing slowly in a room nobody was using anymore. She took a picture. She sent it to Marcus. His response came in 47 seconds. She counted later, when she had nothing but time to replay it. 47 seconds was fast enough that she knew he had read it immediately, and fast enough that he had not thought about it at all. That can't be mine. Then silence. Then, and this was the part that would sit in her like a splinter for a long time, blocked. On every platform. His number disconnected. 2 years. 2 years of Sunday mornings and arguments about nothing, and his jacket hanging on the back of her bedroom door. And he was gone in the time it takes to read 5 words and press 3 buttons. She finished her shift. She did not know how, but she did. She checked on Mr. Tatum in room 412, who was recovering from a bypass and always wanted to talk about the Braves. She updated charts. She refilled a saline bag with steady hands. She said goodnight to Keisha at the nurse's station and walked out into the parking lot where the rain had softened to a mist, and sat in her car for 20 minutes without starting the engine. It was on the fourth night after that, a Tuesday, the second week of a stretch of overnight shifts, that she made the mistake. She was back in the fourth-floor bathroom, not for another test. She already knew. She went there because it was the only place in the hospital where no one would look for her, where the buzzing light and the smell of industrial cleaner felt, for some strange reason, like honesty. She sat on the same toilet seat with her phone in her hand, her coils pulled back loose, and two of them falling forward across her forehead, her butterfly necklace cool against her collarbone. She wanted to call her sister Dana. Dana was the only person who knew, the only person Chelsea had told. Because Dana was the kind of woman who received bad news like a wall receives a fist. She absorbed it. She did not shatter. And then she figured out what to do next. Chelsea needed that right now. She needed someone to absorb this with her. She opened her messages. She found what she thought was Dana's thread. She typed quickly, the way you type when your hands are shaking and you are trying to outrun the emotion behind the words. I'm pregnant. He left. I don't know what to do. I'm scared. She pressed send. She put the phone face down on her thigh and pressed the heel of her hand against her sternum, where the cold, quiet feeling had been living for 4 days, and she breathed in the way she taught patients to breathe. Slow, deliberate, through the nose, like you were choosing to stay in your own body on purpose. The phone buzzed. She flipped it over. I'm coming home. She read it twice, a third time. Then she looked at the number. The thread she had opened was not Dana's. The contact name she had tapped was a number she had saved 6 months ago. A patient's emergency contact who had never been reached, whose information she had kept in her phone out of the particular kind of guilt that comes from a case that didn't end well. 1 digit different from Dana's. 1 digit. She stared at the message. I'm coming home. The words did not feel like a mistake. That was the thing that frightened her. They felt like something someone meant. Not to her, she understood that, but to someone. Like she had intercepted a message that was real and urgent and full of a weight she could not yet name. She typed, "Who is this?" 14 floors up, in a building on Peachtree Street that housed a private equity firm on its face and considerably more complicated operations in its back infrastructure, John Min-jun was sitting in a leather chair in the dark. Not because he preferred the dark, though by now he had grown accustomed to it. The overhead lights had been off for 2 hours. He had not turned them on when they timed out because doing so would have required a decision. And he was very tired of decisions tonight. The meeting had gone the way meetings always went when two sides were measuring how serious the other was. No one said what they meant. Everything was communicated in what was left out, in the silence between sentences, in who poured their own drink and who waited to be poured for. Min-jun had poured his own. He always did. He had learned at 22 that the moment you waited for someone else to pour your drink, you had already told them something you could not take back. He was 34 years old, and he was tired in a way that sleep did not fix. His phone was face up on the desk. He was not looking at it. He was looking at the middle distance somewhere above the Atlanta skyline, visible through the floor-to-ceiling glass, at the lights of a city that did not know his name in any way that mattered, that would not notice if he were not in it. The phone lit up. He glanced at it. Unknown number. A message. I'm pregnant. He left. I don't know what to do. I'm scared. He picked up the phone. He read it once. The words were simple words, plain, unadorned. The kind of sentence someone writes when they have run out of the energy to soften anything. He had read hundreds of messages in his life that were designed to be something. Persuasive, threatening, careful. This one was none of those things. This one was just true. He looked at the number. And then, because he was a man who noticed details as a matter of survival, he looked at the contact directly above it in his recent list. Ji-yeon. The number on the screen and the number saved under her name were nearly identical. One transposed digit. His chest did something he did not have a word for. Not pain exactly, because he had learned to separate himself from that. Something more like recognition. Like pressing on a bruise you had forgotten was there. He should have typed, "Wrong number. I'm sorry." He knew this. He was not a sentimental man. Sentiment in his world was a liability that had gotten people killed, and he had long ago put his feelings in a place that was locked and necessary and not to be visited during business hours, or any hours that required clarity. He typed, "I'm coming home." He sent it before he understood why. Then he sat in the dark again, the phone in his hand, and waited in a way he had not waited for anything in 3 years. With something that felt, uncomfortably, like wanting to know what happened next. Her reply came within a minute. "Who is this?" He looked at the question for a long time. Outside, Atlanta glittered with indifferent light. The rain had stopped. Somewhere below, his men were doing what men in his organization did at this hour. None of it required him right now. He typed, "Someone who made the same mistake you did, texting the wrong person at the wrong time." She did not respond immediately. He noticed that. Most people, when surprised, reacted within seconds, either with panic or with the particular kind of forced casualness that was its own form of panic. She did neither. She took 4 minutes and 17 seconds to type her next message, which told him something about her before she said a single word about herself. She was someone who thought before she spoke. In his experience, that was rarer than people believed. "So you're not going to pretend you didn't read it." He looked at the message, set the phone down, picked it up again. "Would that have helped you?" Another pause, shorter this time. "No, probably not." He should have ended it there. A polite acknowledgement, a brief apology for the confusion, and then silence. The clean, professional silence he had built his entire adult life inside of. He was good at silence. He had been told, more than once, that his silence was the most intimidating thing about him, which was saying something, given the tattoos and the height, and the particular way he had of looking at a person like he was reading a document they hadn't meant to leave out. But the city was quiet outside the glass, and the chair was cold, and the number in his recent list, one entry above hers, still had a name attached to it that he had never been able to delete. He typed, "Are you somewhere safe right now?" In the 4th-floor bathroom of Grady Memorial, Chelsea read the question and felt something shift in her. Not relief. She was too careful for relief this fast. But something adjacent to it. The question was not, "Are you okay?" which was what people asked when they wanted to feel like they had done their part. It was, "Are you somewhere safe?" which was a different question entirely. It was the question of someone who understood that okay and safe were not the same thing. "I'm at work," she typed. "Hospital. So yes. Ironically, the safest place I know." "You're working tonight?" "I work every night. I'm a nurse." A pause from his end, longer than the others. Then you already know how to handle things that would break most people. She stared at that for a moment. Her thumb hovered over the keyboard. She was aware, distantly, that she was sitting in a hospital bathroom at 2 a.m. having a conversation with a complete stranger about her pregnancy, and that this was objectively the strangest thing that had happened to her in a week full of strange things. But the stranger had not asked for anything, had not offered anything hollow, had simply observed. I handle other people's things, she typed finally. My own is different. It always is. She almost asked who he was again. She had already asked once, and he had answered sideways, and she understood instinctively that pushing would close something that was, right now, barely open. Instead, she typed, "Why did you answer? You could have just ignored it." The question sat on his screen in the dark office. He read it and looked up at the ceiling for a moment. A habit Ji-yeon had teased him about. You always look at the ceiling when you don't want to answer something, June. The ceiling doesn't know anything. Why do you keep asking it? And then he looked back down. I don't know, he typed. Which was, for him, an extraordinary thing to admit to anyone. That's honest, at least. I try to be. When it costs me nothing. She laughed. She was surprised by the laugh. Surprised it was in her, given the last 4 days. It came out small and quiet, barely a sound, but real. Fair enough, she typed. She heard Keisha's voice somewhere down the hall, the specific tone she used when a monitor started alarming, and Chelsea knew she had maybe 3 more minutes before she needed to be back on the floor. But she looked at the conversation on her screen, this small, strange thread with a stranger who had received her worst moment and had not run from it, had not minimized it, had not turned it into something about themselves. And she typed one more thing before she stood up. I don't know your name. His reply came before she reached the door. June. She told herself it would be one conversation. That was reasonable. That was the kind of thing a sensible person said to themselves. One conversation, because it was late and she was vulnerable, and he had been kind in an unexpected way, and that was all it needed to be. A small, strange moment at 2 a.m. that she would think about occasionally for a few weeks and then forget. The next night, he messaged her first. It was 1:48 a.m. Just 3 words. Still at work? She was. She answered. They talked until 4 a.m. The night after that, it was closer to midnight. He asked what the hardest part of the job was. Not the saddest part, not the grossest part, the way people usually asked, reaching for the dramatic. The hardest part. She told him it was the families. That the patient was almost never the hardest part. That she could be present with the patient, could focus, could use the training and the protocol and the knowledge to build a wall between her feelings and her hands. But the families were outside that wall. The families sat in waiting rooms and looked at her face when she came through the door, and she had learned over 4 years to keep her face exactly neutral. Not cold, not warm, just a steady plane of presence. Because she had seen what happened when nurses let their faces talk first. You hold everything, he said. I hold everything, she agreed. And then? And then I drive home and eat cereal at 6 a.m. and watch something stupid on my phone until I fall asleep. What kind of cereal? She laughed again, longer this time. Honey Nut Cheerios. Every day for 6 years. Don't judge me. I'm not judging. I'm deciding if I can respect you. And? The jury's still out. 6 years is a long time to commit to one cereal. She was smiling at her phone in the dark of her apartment, lying on her side with the lamp on, and she became aware of what her face was doing, and it surprised her in the same way the first laugh had. She had not smiled like this, the involuntary kind, the kind that happened before you gave it permission, in longer than she wanted to calculate. She asked him once what time zone he was in. He said Atlanta. She said she had assumed he was somewhere overseas. He asked why. She said because of the hours. He said he kept unusual hours. She accepted that without pulling on it. She asked what he did. He said he solved problems. She asked what kind of problems. He said the kind that didn't have clean answers. She said that sounded like nursing. He said maybe. He said there was probably more paperwork in nursing. She said he had no idea. She did not ask again about his work. She noticed that he never asked about Marcus. Not what he looked like, not what had happened between them, not whether she had tried to reach him since. Most people, when they knew about Marcus, wanted to talk about Marcus. They wanted the story, the timeline, the specific cruelties, the satisfying moral conclusion. June never asked for any of it. He asked about her, what she wanted, what she was afraid of. Not in the way of an interrogation, quietly, obliquely, the way someone touches the edge of a thing to understand its shape without breaking it. 3 weeks in, she knew his voice from the rhythm of his typing. She knew he was deliberate. He did not send multiple short messages in a row. He composed his thoughts and sent them whole. She knew he was dry in a way that was easy to miss if you were not paying attention. She knew he was awake at hours when most people weren't, and that he seemed, underneath the composure she could feel even through a screen, to be someone who had been carrying something for a very long time. She did not know his last name. She did not know what he looked like. She told herself this was fine, that the anonymity was actually part of why it worked, because there was no performance possible, no version of herself she could curate. Just words, just honesty, just two people who had accidentally found each other at the bottom of their respective nights. She was 7 weeks pregnant. Her body was changing in small ways she cataloged with clinical attention and tried not to think about too much. She had not told anyone at work. She had told Dana, who had said, "Okay, we're going to figure this out," in the voice Dana used when she meant it, and had not made it about Marcus or about their father or about any of the complicated inherited history that Chelsea had been trying to outrun for most of her adult life. She had not told June. Not directly. He knew the beginning of it. He had been there for the beginning of it, in a sense. But she had not said, "I am keeping it," or "I am 7 weeks," or "The nausea is worst between 6 and 9 in the morning, which is the exact window when I should be sleeping after a night shift." Those felt like facts that belonged to a later stage of trust, if there was a later stage, which she was careful not to assume. Then the message came that changed everything. It was a Thursday. She was off work, sitting at the small table in her kitchen with toast she was not eating because the smell of the butter was wrong in a way she couldn't explain, when her phone buzzed with a message from June's number. She opened it automatically. Package confirmed for the Friday window. Nguyen wants the South Side distribution point cleared before the Peachtree handoff. Tell Rivera, not over the phone. She read it twice. Her toast got cold. She was a woman who had spent 4 years in a trauma unit. She was not naive about the world, and she was not naive about people, and she was not naive about the particular landscape of meanings that certain words assembled when they appeared together in a certain order. Package, distribution point, not over the phone. She sat with the message for a long time. Then she opened a browser on her phone and she searched the number. What came back was fragments. A name mentioned sideways in an old article from a Korean news outlet, translated imperfectly by an automatic service, connected to words she recognized in any language. A name in a federal document available through a public court filing. The tattoos described in one account. The reach of the organization described in another. Jun Min-jun. She put her phone face down on the table and sat in her kitchen in the morning light with her cold toast and her uneaten butter smell. And she understood, with the clarity that comes only when something you were half suspecting becomes fully real, exactly who she had been talking to every night for 3 weeks. She did not respond to his messages for 2 days. On the second day of her silence, he sent one message. I know what you found. She was sitting on the edge of her bed when it came through, still in her scrubs from the night shift, her coils loose and flattened on one side from where she had pressed her head against the car window on the drive home. She had slept 3 hours. She had woken up with the particular kind of alertness that comes not from rest, but from a body that has decided, without consulting you, that it is done pretending to sleep. She read the message. She read it again. She set the phone down on the comforter and looked at the wall. The thing that frightened her was not that he knew. She had expected that. A man in his position would have some mechanism for knowing, some apparatus of awareness she could not fully see. What frightened her was that the message did not try to explain, did not say, it's not what you think, or let me tell you the whole story, or any of the things that people said when they wanted to control the narrative before you could form your own. He simply acknowledged that she knew, and then he waited. That was, she was realizing, very much how he did everything. She picked up the phone. Then, you know why I can't do this, she typed. His reply came in less than a minute. You're right, but I'm going to ask you to meet me anyway. Once. In public. And if after that you want me gone, I'll be gone. She put the phone down again. She went to the kitchen and drank a glass of water standing at the sink, looking out the small window above it at the parking lot of her building, where 2 kids were drawing something on the asphalt with chalk. A large circular shape that might have been a sun or might have been a face. She watched them for a moment. The sensible answer was no. The sensible answer was to say, I wish you well, I hope whatever you're carrying gets lighter, thank you for the 3 weeks, and then change her number and buy a new cereal and let it be what it was. A strange, tender accident that had helped her survive a very hard month and nothing more. The sensible answer was the answer a woman with a baby coming and $400 in her bank account and no room for complications should absolutely give. She went back to the bedroom. She picked up the phone. Once, she typed. Public place. I choose where. She chose the cafe on Moreland Avenue in Little Five Points because she had been going there for 6 years and knew every exit and knew the owner by name and knew that on a Wednesday at noon, it would be full enough that nothing dramatic could happen without witnesses and quiet enough that she would be able to hear him speak. She wore her jeans, the dark ones, the ones that still fit, and her Nike Airs, and a cream top she had bought herself the previous winter and never found an occasion for. Her gold hoops, her butterfly necklace, her hair down, coils full, the way she wore it when she was not performing anything for anyone. She arrived 8 minutes early. She ordered a tea she did not particularly want and took a table near the window where she could see the door and sat with her hands around the warm cup and watched the street. He came through the door at exactly noon. She recognized him from the fraction of a photograph she had found in her search. But photographs had not prepared her for the way he moved through a room, the particular quality of his presence, which was not loud and was not aggressive, but was simply undeniable. The way a load-bearing wall is undeniable. The way you understand instinctively that this is something the structure depends on. He was taller than she had expected. The tuxedo black suit, the white shirt open at the collar, the tattoo rising from his neck in dark, fluid lines. He scanned the room in a single motion that was so practiced, it looked almost like nothing, just a man looking around a cafe. And then his eyes found her. He walked to the table. He did not extend his hand. He pulled out the chair across from her and sat down and looked at her directly, the way she had somehow known he would. Not performing ease, not managing the awkwardness of a first meeting. Just present. Fully, quietly present. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said. His voice was lower than she had imagined, and slower. "I wasn't either," she said. "Right up until I was walking through the door." Something moved across his face. Not quite a smile, but the precondition for one. The territory just before the border. He ordered a black coffee from the server without looking at the menu. She watched him do it and thought about the 3 weeks of late-night messages, the careful rhythms of his typing, the way he asked questions like he was reading something rather than performing curiosity. And she tried to connect that person to the one sitting across from her now, the one with the dragon climbing his neck and the Patek Philippe, and the particular stillness that she suspected was not peace, but something that had been constructed very deliberately in the place where peace should have been. "You should ask me what you want to ask me," he said. "I want to ask you everything," she said. "But I'm going to ask you one thing." He waited. "Do you think you're a good person?" The cafe moved around them. Someone laughed at the counter. A chair scraped. He held her question for a long moment, the way she had learned he held things. Not avoiding, just making sure he had it fully before he responded. "No," he said. "I don't." She had expected deflection or qualification, or the particular performance of honesty that was still a form of impression management. She had not expected the clean, undefended simplicity of that answer. It sat between them on the table like something he had placed there on purpose. "Then why are you here?" she asked. And that was when he told her about Ji-yun. He did not tell it dramatically. That was what she would remember later, that he told it the way you tell a fact that has become so much a part of you that the emotion of it has gone somewhere else, somewhere internal and structural, load-bearing in its own way. He told her about the number, about how Ji-yun's contact was one entry above hers in his recent list, 1 digit different, and how he had known immediately when he saw the message that it was a mistake and had answered anyway because... And here he paused and looked at the table for a moment and then back at her. Because it was 2 a.m. and the message was real. And he was tired of everything in his life being managed, including his own grief. "She was pregnant," he said, "when she died. It was meant to be me." Chelsea held that. She was an ICU nurse. She knew what loss looked like from the inside, from the outside, from the side where you were the one delivering the information, and from the side where you were the one receiving it. She knew its specific topography, the places it settled, the shapes it made in the way a person held themselves, the way it changed the sound of someone's voice when they talked around it, rather than about it. She looked at June across the small table and understood that she was looking at someone who had been living inside unprocessed grief for 3 years. And had built an entire world inside that grief and called it survival. "I'm not her," Chelsea said. Quietly, but completely. I need you to know that I know that. And that I need you to know it too. I know, he said. I knew it the second night. Then why did you keep talking to me? He looked at her steadily. Because you were real. And I had forgotten what that felt like. The tea had gone cold. She wrapped both hands around the cup anyway. A habit. Comfort in the shape of the gesture rather than the warmth. My world is going to come into yours, he said. I can't promise it won't. I want to be honest about that. I know. And you still came. I came to decide, she said. I haven't decided yet. He nodded once, like that was the right answer. Like he had not expected anything else, and would not have wanted it. They sat in the cafe for another 40 minutes. They talked about small things. The neighborhood, the chalk drawing she had seen in her parking lot that morning, a patient she could describe without identifying, a restaurant he said made the best sundubu jjigae she would ever eat, and that she said she would believe when she saw it. The conversation moved the way their messages had moved, with that particular ease that comes not from having nothing at stake, but from having already shown each other the hardest things, so that everything after is somehow lighter. When they stood to leave, he held the door for her and she walked out into the Atlanta noon and felt the sun on her face, and her hand moved, without thinking, to her stomach. Not dramatically, just briefly, the way it had started doing lately, the small unconscious acknowledgement of presence. He saw it. She knew he saw it. He did not say anything. I'll think about it, she said. That's all I asked, he said. She walked to her car. She did not look back. But she was aware of him standing on the sidewalk until she turned the corner, and she was aware that for the first time in 6 weeks, the cold, quiet thing in her chest had moved slightly. Not gone, but shifted. The way furniture shifts when someone helps you rearrange a room. She called Dana from the car. How did it go? Dana asked. Chelsea watched the traffic on Moreland and thought about the answer. He told me the truth when he didn't have to, she said. Both times. Dana was quiet for a moment. That's not nothing. No, Chelsea said. It's really not. She did not make a decision that day, but she drove home a different way than she had come, a longer route through the neighborhood she had lived in since she was 23, past the library and the laundromat and the church on the corner with the sign out front that always had something on it that felt, improbably, addressed to her specifically. Today it said, "The door you're afraid of is usually the right one." She took a picture of it. She did not send it to anyone. She went home. She ate something that was not cereal for the first time in 2 weeks. She slept 6 uninterrupted hours and woke up in the late afternoon with the low gold light coming through the curtains and her hand on her stomach, and something that felt, carefully and tentatively and without any promises, like the beginning of forward. She picked up her phone. She opened his thread. I've thought about it, she typed. 3 dots appeared immediately. And? She looked at the ceiling, then at the window, then at the phone. You can be the stranger who shows up, but slowly, and on my terms. His reply came in 10 seconds. Your terms. 2 words. No negotiation. No conditions appended. Just yes. As simply as anything had ever been yes. She put the phone down and looked at the ceiling for a long time after. Not because she had questions for it, but because something in her had settled, quietly and without announcement, into a shape she had not felt before. Not certainty, not safety, but something that was reaching in the direction of both. Outside her window, Atlanta moved through its afternoon without knowing any of it. The city did not know about the message sent to the wrong number. It did not know about the man in the dark office who had answered instead of closing the screen. It did not know about the woman who had laughed for the first time in days at something a stranger said about cereal. It did not know that the stranger who showed up, when he finally did, would change everything. And it did not know, yet, how much it would cost him to do it right. The weeks that followed were the strangest and most ordinary of Chelsea Morgan Hayes' life. Strange because of what she knew, because every time June's name appeared on her screen, she was aware, underneath the warmth of it, of the weight of what he was. Because she had read enough in those 2 days of silence to understand the scale of what Junmin Jun operated inside, the size of the shadow his world cast. Because she was a woman who had grown up watching her mother work double shifts to keep the lights on and had put herself through nursing school on loans and scholarships and the particular ferocious discipline of someone who understood that there was no net beneath her, and she did not make careless choices with things that mattered. Ordinary because he had said your terms and meant it. Because he texted at 7 p.m. asking if she had eaten, the way her mother used to call on Sunday mornings to ask the same thing, not as an obligation, but as the specific language of someone who cared about your continued existence in the world. Because he remembered things, the name of her difficult patient, the appointment she mentioned once in passing, the fact that she hated the smell of artificial vanilla in any form, a fact she had mentioned exactly once as an aside, and that he had never forgotten. Because the conversations at midnight felt like the same conversations they had been having from the beginning. Unperformed, unhurried. Two people talking in the dark about the real shape of their lives. She was 4 months along when she finally let him come to the prenatal appointment. She had not invited him exactly. She had mentioned it, casually, the way you mention something to test the air pressure in a room. Said that she had an appointment Thursday morning, the anatomy scan, the one where they could tell you things. He had said nothing in response for a full minute, which was long for him. Then, what time? She had given him the time. She had not said, come, not explicitly. He had understood anyway. He was already in the waiting room when she arrived, which meant he had gotten there before her, which meant he had thought about it, had made a decision about it, had arranged himself around it in a way that was not accidental. He was in a dark coat over a plain black sweater. No suit, no watch visible. The tattoo on his neck present, but somehow quieter than it seemed in other contexts. He stood when he saw her. He did not hug her or touch her in any way. He just stood and looked at her the way she had learned he looked at things he was serious about. Fully, without managing his expression into something more comfortable. You didn't have to, she said. I know, he said. They sat side by side in the waiting room with a People magazine between them that neither of them read and the low ambient noise of a medical office around them. And Chelsea was aware that this was the most domestic moment of her adult life, and that it was happening with a man she had technically known for 4 months and had met in person exactly twice, and who ran a criminal organization across 3 cities. She almost laughed. She kept it internal. The scan was 22 minutes. The technician was warm and professional and clearly accustomed to arrangements that were not straightforwardly legible. June stood to the side, slightly back, at an angle that gave Chelsea the center of the space without removing himself from it. When the heartbeat came through the monitor, that particular rapid, percussive sound, specific and undeniable, the sound of something that was real in a way that silenced every abstraction. Chelsea felt her eyes go hot. She did not cry. She was a nurse. She had held this particular emotion in check for other people's children in rooms like this for 4 years, and she was not going to lose it now. But she heard, from slightly behind her left shoulder, a sound that was barely a sound, more like an intake of breath that had caught on something. A small, involuntary fracture in the composed silence that June maintained around himself like architecture. She did not look at him. She let him have it privately, the way you let someone have a moment that is not yours to witness directly. In the car afterward, he was quiet for longer than usual. They stood in the parking lot in the gray Thursday morning, not quite ready to separate, and she watched him look at the middle distance the way she had learned he did when he was processing something he had not anticipated. She had an appointment, he said finally. Ji-yeon. She never made it. Chelsea did not fill the silence with anything. She had learned over these months that June's silences were not absences. They were the shape of things he was deciding whether to say. I'm glad you made yours, he said. She looked at him. Me too. They were standing 2 feet apart in a hospital parking lot in Atlanta on an unremarkable Thursday morning, and the city was doing what it always did, indifferent and enormous, and none of it knew anything about what was happening in the specific gravity between these two people. Chelsea thought, not for the first time, and not for the last, that she was standing at the edge of something she could not fully see the shape of, something that required her to decide how much she was willing not to know in exchange for what she was being given. She had not resolved that question. She was living inside it instead, which was, she was learning, its own kind of answer. The thing about danger, Chelsea would think later, was that it rarely arrived announcing itself. It came in the form of an ordinary Tuesday. A man in the corridor. A question that was slightly too specific. She was on the floor, late afternoon, the tail end of a day shift she had picked up to cover for a colleague, when one of the volunteers at the nurses' station said there was a man asking for her. Not a patient's family, not a doctor, a man who had said he was the father of her child and wanted to leave a message. Chelsea walked to the station. The man was gone. He had not waited. But the volunteer described him, and Chelsea felt the cold, quiet thing return to her chest, in a different register than before. Not grief, something sharper. The man the volunteer described was not Marcus. She went to the bathroom. Not the 4th floor bathroom this time, but the one near the exit on the ground floor, the one closest to the door. She opened June's thread. There was a man here, at my job. He said he was the father. He's not. He didn't match the description of anyone I know. She sent it. She stared at the screen. 40 seconds. Which exit are you near right now? Ground floor, south side. Go out that door. Walk to the parking structure on the left. 3rd level. Wait by the stairwell. June? Chelsea. Now. Please. She had spent 4 years making rapid decisions in situations where hesitation cost lives. She did not hesitate. She went out the south door. She walked to the structure. She took the stairs to the 3rd level and stood by the stairwell door in the gray concrete afternoon with her heart doing the thing it did in the ICU when a monitor went critical. Not panic. Something more focused than panic. The specific heightened clarity of a body that understands the stakes. A black car came up the ramp 11 minutes later. One of his men. She had never met him, but she understood immediately from the way he moved, from the particular efficiency of his presence, opened the rear door without speaking. June was inside. He looked at her face when she got in. He said nothing for a moment. Then, "You're okay." "I'm okay," she confirmed. "What's happening?" He was already on the phone to someone, speaking in Korean in a low and very controlled voice, the kind of control that cost something. She understood none of the words. She understood everything about the tone. This was the voice of a man who was in the process of solving a problem with the cold efficiency of someone who had solved problems this way before and did not enjoy it and was going to do it anyway. When he hung up, he looked at her directly. "There's a group," he said. "They've been watching me. They found out about you." The word "you" landed in her chest. "They sent someone to find out your routine," he said. "Your hours, your exits. They used Marcus as a name because they knew it was connected to you." "How did they know about Marcus?" "They didn't. They found him and asked him questions about you, and he answered because he was frightened and didn't understand what was happening." She looked out the window of the moving car at Atlanta going past and thought about Marcus, who had blocked her on every platform and was apparently now being visited by people asking questions about her, and felt a complicated mixture of things that she did not have time to process in order. "Is Marcus?" "He's fine. Frightened, but fine." She nodded. She looked back at June. "Is my apartment safe?" "Not tonight." "Dana?" "She doesn't know you're connected to me. She's not a target." "And me?" He looked at her and she understood, from the specific quality of his stillness, that this was the question he had been dreading. Not because he did not have an answer, but because the answer was the one that cost him the most. "You're safe," he said. "I'm going to make sure of that." "By handling it," she said, not a question. "Yes." She looked at her hands in her lap. The butterfly necklace was cool against her collarbone. Outside, the city moved past in late afternoon gold. She was 6 months pregnant and sitting in a car belonging to a man who ran an organization she did not fully understand and whose world had now, as he had warned her it might, reached into hers. She had known this was a possibility. She had walked into it with open eyes. But knowing a thing is possible and sitting inside it happening were different countries entirely. She did not say, "I told you so," to herself. That was not a useful country to visit. She said, "After this is handled, I need to talk to you." He looked at her. "I know." "You know what I'm going to say?" "Yes." "And?" He was quiet for a long moment. The car moved through Atlanta. Somewhere ahead of them, she understood, things were being arranged and resolved in ways she would never see directly. The apparatus of his world, doing what it did. "And I think you're going to be right," he said quietly. She looked at him. He was looking straight ahead at the back of the driver's seat, at something past it that she could not see. His profile in the fading afternoon light, the strong jaw, the silver at his temple, the tattoo that had frightened her once and now simply looked like part of him, like any scar looks like part of a person when you have learned their story. She wanted to reach across the space between them. She did not. She sat with her hands in her lap and let the city go past, and understood that some things were true and some things were also impossible. And that love, if that was what this was, and she was beginning to believe it was, did not always get to be both true and possible at the same time. She met him one last time at the same cafe. Same table, same noon light coming through the window. He arrived exactly on time, as he always did. Dark coat. No suit today. He looked, she thought, like a man who had not slept much. Which for him meant he looked almost exactly the same as always, except for something around the eyes that was slightly more exposed than usual. She had Maya's ultrasound picture in her bag. She did not know why she had brought it. She did not take it out.
"It's done," he said. Meaning the other thing. Meaning she was safe. Marcus was safe. The apparatus had resolved itself in whatever way apparatus resolved themselves. "Thank you," she said. He nodded. She held her teacup. She had ordered the same tea as the first time without meaning to. "I meant what I said in the car." "I know you did." "My daughter," she said, and it was the first time she had said it out loud to him, the specific word, daughter, the one she had known since the anatomy scan, cannot grow up with her mother looking over her shoulder at every door. "No," he agreed. "And I can't be who I need to be for her if I'm—" She stopped, tried again. "You make me want things that aren't safe. And I don't have the luxury of wanting unsafe things right now." He looked at her for a long moment. Outside the cafe, Atlanta went about its ordinary life. A woman walked past with a stroller. A man in a delivery uniform locked his bike to the rack by the door. "You are the first person in 3 years," Minjun said slowly, "who has made me feel like I was still in the world. Not managing the world, not surviving the world. In it." Her throat tightened. "I know what I am," he said. "I have never pretended otherwise to you. But I want you to know that what happened between us, the messages, the appointments, the cereal, a small pause, a ghost of that almost smile, was real. For me. Entirely." "I know," she said. And she did. That was the hardest part. Not that it had been false, but that it had been true. Completely true. And still not enough to make it safe. He reached into the inside pocket of his coat. He placed an envelope on the table between them. She looked at it. "It's a contact at a law firm," he said. "Good people. Nothing from me is attached to it except that they're expecting your call. Whatever you need for her, school, medical, whatever comes, it's there. No conditions. No contact required. No debt." "June, it's not about that," he said quietly. "It's not about earning anything. I know I can't. It's just, she should have everything she needs. That's all it is." Chelsea looked at the envelope. She thought about her $400 and her apartment and her Honey Nut Cheerios and her 4 years of night shifts. And she thought about her daughter, whose heartbeat she had heard in a room where this man had stood slightly behind her and made a sound like something fracturing very quietly. She picked up the envelope. "Okay," she said. He stood. She stood. They were on the sidewalk outside the cafe in the Atlanta noon, and there was nothing left to say that hadn't been said or understood. And she looked at him in the full light, the dragon on his neck, the silver at his temple, the dark eyes that had looked at her more honestly than most people she had known for years. And she felt the truth of it settle into her completely. All of it at once. The beauty and the impossibility and the strange grace of having found each other by accident at the bottom of the night. "Take care of yourself," she said. He looked at her for one long last moment. "You too. Both of you." He walked away down the street. She watched him until the crowd absorbed him, until he was just a tall figure in a dark coat, and then not even that. Just Atlanta, just the ordinary city doing its ordinary thing, knowing nothing. She stood on the sidewalk with her hand on her stomach and her butterfly necklace warm now in the afternoon sun, and something moving through her that she would not have a name for until much later. Not grief exactly. Not relief exactly. Something that contained both and was larger than both. The feeling of something that was real and true and finished. She walked to her car. She drove home the long way. Maya G. Hayes was born on a Tuesday in March, 7 pounds and 4 ounces, with her mother's eyes and a cry that the delivery nurse said was the most decisive she had heard all week. Chelsea held her daughter in the blue, early morning light of the delivery room and felt the cold, quiet thing that had lived in her chest since that night in the 4th floor bathroom. The night of the test, the night of Marcus, the night of the wrong number. Dissolve completely. Not gradually, but all at once, the way ice goes when the temperature has been changing for a long time, and then suddenly, without announcement, becomes water. G, she named the middle name. She did not explain it to anyone. Dana asked once, gently, and Chelsea said it was for someone who deserved to be remembered, and Dana, who understood Chelsea better than anyone, did not ask again. The law firm called 2 weeks after Maya was born. Everything was arranged as promised. No conditions, no contact. Just a door that had been opened and left open, quietly, by someone who had understood that the most important thing he could give her was the ability to walk through it on her own. Chelsea went back to work 6 weeks later. Night shifts at first, then a mix. She moved Maya's bassinet into the bedroom and learned to sleep in the intervals between feedings with the particular skill of someone who had learned, years ago, to rest inside impossible circumstances. She called Dana on Sunday mornings. She ate Honey Nut Cheerios at 6 a.m. after night shifts and felt, for the first time, that the ritual was not an absence of something better, but simply what her life looked like, specific and hers. She did not delete his number. She did not contact it either. Some doors, she had learned, did not need to be opened again to have meant something. Some connections were real precisely because they had known their own limits. Some people came into your life through the wrong number at the right time and changed the shape of everything without staying to see what they had changed. She thought about him sometimes, late nights mostly, in the specific quiet after Maya settled. She thought about the dark office and the phone lighting up. She thought about a man who had kept a dead woman's number in his contacts for 3 years and had answered a stranger's message in the middle of the night because he was tired of everything being managed. She hoped he was somewhere in the world finding out what it felt like to be in it again. She thought he probably was. She looked at her daughter's sleeping face, and the butterfly necklace caught the lamplight, and somewhere outside Atlanta did what Atlanta did, enormous and indifferent, and full of people texting the wrong numbers, making the right mistakes, finding each other in the spaces between what they meant to do and what they actually did. Maya G. Hayes slept on, unknowing, into her particular future. And her mother, who had learned to hold everything, held her. And finally, at last, let herself be held back. If this story moved you, take just a moment and reflect. Have you ever been the person holding everyone else together, while quietly falling apart inside, with no one to call? Have you ever judged someone by the world they came from, only to discover that the most honest person in your life was the last one you expected? And have you ever had to let go of something real, not because it wasn't true, but because love sometimes means knowing what you cannot ask someone to carry? Tell us your story in the comments. We read every single one. And if you believe in stories about redemption, unexpected grace,
and the courage it takes to let go of the right thing for the right reasons. Make sure you subscribe to the channel.